We got Connor O'Gara with us Saturday Down South. I think Connor rewatches some of the college football games from the previous. You would rewatch college football games rather than watch USFL games, would you, Connor?
What do you mean would? Yeah, I mean, that's what I do. This is the time of year to get that done. Hey, look, you guys know this. We sometimes miss out on some stuff on Saturdays. They're a bit of a blur, and this is the perfect time of year to kind of go back and watch some things. Just yesterday, before the Super Bowl, I'm watching Anthony Richardson clips against LSU. We're always in mid-season form here, but yeah, of course I'd watch that over the USFL because it's more football. It's more SEC football specifically.
Well, what I keep thinking is when I watch the last 3 weeks of NFL playoff football, counting the Super Bowl, like the Super Wild Card weekend was kind of wasn't great. Everything after that was just amazing. I mean, you had games that went down to the final to triple zeros in every single one of them. College football wishes it could have the postseason that the NFL does, and that's just a statement. I'll let you go with that.
Yeah, it's just unrealistic, though. I mean, the talent disparity is just so much different. As Arkansas fans can attest to, this year when number 1 Georgia is facing number 8 Arkansas, both teams are undefeated, and it's a 3-score spread. 3-score spreads in the NFL are like, they're newsworthy because they never happen. And that was the number 1 team in the country against the number 8 team in the country. So that just tells you all you need to know about the talent disparity, and that's not changing anytime soon. And I'm okay with that not changing to a certain extent because I also don't have something at stake like maybe the lesser talented teams. It's not like I'm a head coach of like a tier 3 program who's trying to figure out how in the world I can get on that stage. So for me, it's obviously different, but it's not going to ever line up that way. We find our entertainment not in parity, but in the madness that can ensue within a given season and some of these regular season moments that we get.
And we see, Major League Baseball right now, the owners are trying to expand playoffs. And they're in this negotiation with players. The NFL just kind of did it. They just expanded playoffs. And I listened to Greg Sankey on Paul Feinbaum last week, and here it was. I mean, in the summer, we thought this thing was like a done deal, that the playoff was going to expand. It might expand earlier than the end of the contract. And right now, I don't know what to think because it doesn't seem like there's any real agreeance amongst the major players, the conferences, as to how this is going to go. And this all kind of just bleeds from Texas and Oklahoma coming into the SEC, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I was going to say there definitely is a major agreement because the alliance exists, and we need not forget about the power of the alliance and how obviously the Big Ten, the Pac-12, and the ACC, they looked into each other's eyes, and now they're going to set forth on this mission to control college football. And so far, they have done that by virtue of not moving forward with this playoff expansion that they need. So mission accomplished, I guess, from the alliance. And Greg Sankey is just going to be content to sit back and be like, hey, look, I said I would do this for the good of the sport. And he's reached that point. But at the same time, he's also not going to totally give in because the guy doesn't have to. And these other conferences are the ones that have to. And so that's kind of where the stalemate is at with this whole thing. Yeah, I mean, ideally, we would have had more clarity on this. And when this was all happening and we found out about Texas and Oklahoma, the subsequent news after that, all of a sudden these other conferences, they didn't want to see the SEC control the playoff in this sort of way. It was like, well, look, that was going to happen with Texas or Oklahoma or not. Like that wasn't necessarily make or break with the SEC probably having control over a 12-team playoff as well. So this backwards logic, some will view it as control. I obviously don't based on my tone, but I think that it's just kind of weird to see that negotiations have gotten to this point and why it does kind of feel like we are far off from seeing the 14 field expanded.
Well, one thing that has changed and will continue to grow and change in college athletics, especially, in the SEC, is NIL. And you're watching the Super Bowl last night, and you see the starting quarterback for Jackson State in a Greek yogurt commercial. Now, it helps that his father is Deion Sanders primetime, but I think, to my recollection, be first active college football player in a national commercial on that spot, on that stage. When do you start to think that might become more of a norm instead of just we have one to where, next year we turn on the Super Bowl and there's 5 different SEC players out there trotting and pushing different products.
I think there will be some, but I don't think there are going to be tons of them. I actually jokingly said to my wife before we were watching the Super Bowl, and she grew up in Indianapolis, so big Peyton Manning fan. But I said to her, I'm like, how many times are we going to see the Mannings tonight? Mm-hmm. I said the better question is whether or not we're going to see Arch. I mean, think about it. Like, you could theoretically have a world in which that is possible. You still have to be recognizable, and that's part of it too. Like, yeah, we're kind of entrenched in college football, and a lot of these guys. Like, if Arch Manning were on a commercial, we'd be talking about it right now, and we would have all these discussions about his NIL value, and Darren Ravel would have 10 million tweets about it. But this is still a spot in which, on this age, it might not make as much sense. Now, seeing guys on national commercials, I think that there's going to be a little bit of a pushback to that. Let's not forget that a certain DJ Uyunglele was the star of a national Dr. Pepper campaign. And I don't know what their return on that was, but I can't imagine it was that good. Now, there are going to be other guys who are going to profit from that, and they're going to be just fine. We're going to see more of that throughout this offseason probably, because it's the first full offseason in which we've had the NIL era. But at the same time, I still think there's going to be a little bit of that pushback and a little bit of this desire to have only the recognizable type of situations. It's got to be very, very specific like it was with Deion.
Yeah. And Connor, one thing that, while I feel like it's finally, this drama saga is finally starting to wrap up with the announcement from Friday, what are your thoughts on the latest in the Brian Harsin situation at Auburn with the 2 statements on Friday? He'll stay as the head coach of Auburn. How does Auburn, and especially the people in charge, save face in this situation? Because they just look so bad to me, and I think to most people.
Yeah, they do. And at the same time, this is almost par for the course for Auburn, right? If there's ever a university, a football program that is used to existing in this weird state of instability, I think it's Auburn, right? I think that this going through this for Brian Harsin in this week that he called one of the toughest weeks he's had his entire life. And you know what? If you factor in the rumors that were going around about him cheating on his wife and all those different things, yeah, I totally get where he's coming from with that. And having all of a sudden the rug pulled out from under you, despite the fact that, look, you had a rough year one, you had a rough finish, but at the same time, it wasn't the disaster that you've seen year one be at other programs. So I still look at this situation and say the hill in which they have to climb is so steep. It is incredibly steep having to play Kirby Smart, Nick Saban on an annual basis, much less doing that on the road, much less having to play in this league where half of their schedule is going to be against preseason top 25 opponents. And I don't think Brian Harsin is by any means out of the woods yet, just because his administration came out and said that we have to be perfectly aligned. Let's see what happens if Auburn starts off, maybe they have their first 5 games at home, but let's see what happens if they start off 4-3, which seems very realistic. How are people talking about Brian Harsin then and his $15 million buyout, which is going to be common knowledge? He's going to be on every hot seat list in America coming into this season, and it's going to be no secret whatsoever that in the recruiting world, this will be discussed. This is the easiest bit of negative recruiting you can possibly give competition, and the entire thing with him was, he wasn't recruiting at the level that they wanted him to. Well, how do you expect them to do now?
Exactly.
I mean, it's unbelievable that they have this logic and that they're allowed to exist in this facet. But you know what? They've been able to have programs that are on the brink of winning a national championship with their 3 previous head coaches, and that's kind of why we got to this point.
We've done so much talking about Auburn over the last week, so I want to just put that thing to bed. I want to move on to something that I think will ingratiate you to Razorback fans. If you already haven't over the last 3 years, you've been coming on our air here, Connor. But Razorback fans get pissed when they don't see Traylon Burks as the best wide receiver in the draft. And I read your column today on Saturday Down South, and the headline of your first point on 7 SEC-related thoughts looking towards the mock drafts that you've been reading is, I get mad. You didn't say I don't like it. He didn't say I get upset. You could have written pissed. He said, I get mad when I don't see Traylon Burks as wide receiver 1. Connor, Razorback fans love you even more now than they did 20 seconds ago.
Look, I'm banging the drum for Traylon Burks a whole lot. on these airwaves. I really have. And it baffles me that I still have to do that again after the 3-year career that he just had at Arkansas. And I'm seeing some of these mock drafts that have him as the 6th receiver off the board. Like, just tell me you haven't watched Treylon Burks without telling me you haven't watched Treylon Burks, because that to me is just an absolute joke. What he has done at that size, playing out of the slot, mostly in the Kendall Briles offense, but still being able to move around and have the catch radius that he had, to me is unbelievable. And I think the fact that he did this past year without Mike Woods, and without having a true number 2 behind him to take some of that pressure off him, where he's at the top of the scouting report. When they're throwing the ball, they're throwing to Treylon Burks, and hey, didn't even have a pass-heavy offense there. He did it with 3 different quarterbacks. I'm not going to hold year 1 against him. That's Chad Morris offense. That's not fair. Nobody should be held to that standard, especially as a true freshman. But to me, I think his body of work is impressive. I love what he brings to the table. I love the mismatches he creates. I love the fact that he's got bigger hands than anybody not named Shaquille O'Neal. I mean, the guy does everything you would want out of a modern receiver. And if you're thinking that 5 receivers are better than Treylon Burks in this draft class, we are watching a different sport.
You remember the phrase, the only guy that could hold Michael Jordan under 20 points was Dean Smith. The only guy that could have made sure Treylon Burks didn't score a touchdown his freshman year was Chad Morris and Joe Craddock. I think we'll look back at that and say, what? How the heck did that happen? We realized the team wasn't very good, but how did Treylon Burks not even score a touchdown as a freshman?
It's almost impressive. I mean, you would almost have to scheme ways to not get him the football, right? Like, because it wasn't like he was never out there or anything like that, and you just sent him on the bench. If that were the case, yeah, I understand. But he was out there, and you still couldn't find ways to get him the football. I mean, that is just an unbelievable thing. And I guess when you're rotating quarterbacks like they're playing cards, I could understand why you would have difficulties getting him the football. But in these past 2 years with an actual competent offense, we've seen what he's capable of. And to me, I would have taken him over Jameson Williams even before the Jameson Williams injury. And I know a lot of people have now kind of taken that as like, okay, we'll put Treylon Burks as our first receiver in the draft. But I think he's worthy of consideration in the top 10 and that later part of the top 10 if a team does need a receiver. And I think he's going to have a really, really high floor in the NFL.
Connor, you're the GOAT. We'll let you escape at that. I want to know. I know as a married man, this is a very important day for you. So, good luck, my friend.
We'll hang in there. We'll be just fine. Appreciate it.
It might be over this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pros and college hoops. For all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline is the #1 spot for all your sports betting needs. Head over to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Use our promo code BELIEVE to get started. That's promo code BLEAV. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage is the best in the business. From sports right down to your favorite Vegas casino games, BetOnline is your #1 online wagering destination. BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports and play your favorite games. BetOnline, where the game starts.